Hey, I'm Dr. J. I'm a service designer, business analyst type. I work at Thoughtworks where I've got the job title Harbinger of Change, and I'm here to represent.
In your words, you are out as a transgressive, non-binary, genderqueer for over 10 years. Could you tell me if you've ever experienced barriers in the workplace and how you overcame those?
So I've been in spaces where I haven't been respected for who I am. So I've been challenged around how I represent myself, how I talk about myself. So I was unemployed and I went for a job interview. We've all been there. And the first thing the person said when they saw me was, "Who organised this?" And I'm like, wow, this is a good start. And it then went downhill from there. And I'm like, wow, this person really, really did not like me, did not like the way that I presented myself, did not like my gender presentation, didn't get my queerness, my outward queerness, anything like that. But what I did, I forced them to interview me because, hey, I'd turned up. And what I also did was I knew that I had all of the skills that they wanted. So I made them sit there, and every time I gave an answer, they were like, this person's got every skill that I wanted. And then they'd sit up and look at me, and you could just see their face fall. And they asked a very red flag question for me. And it'll be asked in different ways to other people. So they asked it to me of how would you handle a homophobic client? And I almost turned around and said the same way as I'm handling a homophobic recruiter. But I didn't. That's what I wish I'd been able to say. But of course I didn't because I was in the middle of an interview. So I turned and said, why don't I've grown up, I've got a thick skin. I grew up around, my father worked in construction. My brother and my uncle all work as mechanics. I've grown up around a rugby club. I've got a fairly thick skin. I can give as good as I get. If people make homophobic or misogynistic remarks, yes, I will call them out on it, but they'll be called out in a way that makes them laugh and is funny. I would never be upset by it. I still can't believe that I gave that answer because I would have loved to just say the same way as I'm dealing with this. And that is one of those total red flags that I got. You know, I would always be told things like, oh, we really love that you're gay, because people saw me as gay, rather than queer, because queer's because, you know, I had one business where a very senior executive would tell me not to use the word queer because that's a pejorative term for them. And I'm like, but it's my self-identity. And it's like, but that's a pejorative term for me, so please don't use it. I came up with, okay, right, you know, we'll use lesbian for me for the moment, but it doesn't really describe my experience. And that those kind of pressures were always there, and always pushing in where I was never enough. So even if I was there as the gay person, it'd be like, well, Jay, we love that you're gay. And we love that you do all this creative stuff, and it's okay to talk to the client about DJing, but could you not mention that you do it in a queer club? And I'm like, but they asked me where I DJ'd. They asked me what I DJ'd as. They asked me the sort of audiences I played for because we were discussing music.
What is your day job as a harbinger of change?
So my day job is a lot about getting people to decide what's their top priority and analysing it and looking at it in terms of what the risk is, what the effort is, and stuff like that. I kind of took the same approach to what I tackle because there's a couple, you don't want to just keep throwing yourself at everything. You want to make the most impact with the least amount of effort, and you also want to take people on a journey. So when I joined Thoughtworks, I think it's 6.5 years ago, they knew that pronouns existed. They didn't quite know how to ask for one. So my first job was to get everyone figuring out how to ask about pronouns, how to say, I'm not sure what your pronoun is, how do I ask it? And it's like, hi, which pronoun do you prefer? You know, it's really simple. And then it becomes you then move it even slightly differently, because if I introduce myself with my pronoun, then there's a social expectation that you will introduce yourself with your pronoun. So I don't have to ask about your pronoun. I'm telling you that this is a good place to say your pronouns. So that's kind of the next level up. So I've gotten them at the first level, and I'm now just working at them to get the next level up. But there's other things around language as well. So it's all around just looking at what are the small changes and what the impacts can be and could be. The other thing that is really important to me, especially with a global company, is keeping that two-way communication going. So what works for me in English might not work for somebody in Brazil or somebody in India or Thailand or Australia. So one of the things that we did is we were trying to find a good word for describing people who don't identify as women or men. So it's women, men, and what do we call it? And we started off with calling it non-binary, but that didn't work for some people because non-binary is a very specific identity in some people's minds. So we've now ended up at something called gender diverse. So it's all about really keeping those two-way communications going and just talking to people and respecting everybody's lived experience and being really open to listen and empathize.
What skills helped you succeed in your business analyst role?
From my degree, I got an ability to research very quickly and to get to grips with a subject. So one of the things from my master's and my PhD study groups is I was at a very small university in New Zealand, and my classes were about 5 to 7 people for the most part, and especially our tutorial classes. So we had a rotating, every week you needed to present a paper. One week it would be a paper from your core subject, like to do with your PhD, etc. The next week would be something that was from the same area as your PhD, but not based on your PhDs. And then the third one, you had to present a paper that had nothing to do with any of the subjects that you know about. And that takes a lot of research and understanding, and also the ability to synthesize what is the most important, or distill out what is the most important point. So that was a really key skill as well, being able to grab a vast amount of data and go, oh, these are the important things out of all of the stuff that I've read. Here's the 3 things you should know, and here's what it means for this project. Another key skill is that ability to understand a huge topic and just go, right, I need to dive into it. Where do I dive? The third one is Excel. Get good with Excel/Google Sheets. Being able to use Google Sheets to do core analysis of things, being able to do basic data analysis. And that's another really big skill that you can also pick up that's really transferable.
What changes have you seen and achieved at Thoughtworks?
One of the interesting things that I think enabled us to amplify what we were doing at Thoughtworks, we were a little LGBT group of like 3 to 5 people. We could generally get about 2 of us to meet up at any point in time. And of course, then we struggled to get anything to happen because it was just too few of us. So I said, hey, why don't we join with the women's group? Because a lot of the stuff overlaps. And there was no women's group. And I said, right, is there a race group? Because a lot of the stuff overlaps. No. And I'm like, I can see an opportunity here. So I then proposed this idea of moving to a pan-diversity way of thinking. So essentially diversity went from the protected characteristics. So we've got sexuality, we've got gender. So these are the current groups that we're working with. We've got sexuality, gender expression, mental health, working carers, working parents, neurodiversity, disability, race, faith, social inclusions. What else? Oh, ageism. That's the other one. So by the time you get a group like that and say, these are all the diverse people, everybody in the company is included in that diversity, because everybody kind of looks and goes, oh, that fits me, or this fits me. We had the entirety of the company on the side of diversity, and that changes how you think. It's about having that pan-diversity group, that huge grouping, and that changed the entire nature of the discussions around diversity and inclusion, because it became diversity, equity and inclusion. How to ensure that people have equitable chances to contribute in this diversity conversation. Also allowed us to really have some deep meaningful conversations, and focus on issues over identities. Because when you focus on the things that bring people together, which was a lot around representation, a lot around feeling included in the conversation, feeling like you could take part in the conversation. Once we got onto those topics, suddenly a whole pile of stuff started to happen, and we ended up with things like working carers leave. That's one of the things that Thoughtworks has brought in. We've also brought in things around if you're having fertility treatments, there's special leaves for that. There's also special leave for people who are trans, who are undergoing gender affirmation surgery or work. There's adjustments that they can have. And around neurodiversity has really been one of the most interesting pieces, because a lot of people in tech have recognised that they're neurodiverse, but don't talk about it with their employees. And we've started making it almost super common to talk about your neurodiversity. So I will talk about having CPTSD, complex PTSD. Now, that makes me neurodiverse in a number of ways, and it looks a bit like autism sometimes, and it looks a bit like ADHD sometimes. It's all anxiety. So if I'm anxious, there are specific behaviors that I will do more, and those are almost, the team kind of needs to know, hey, if Jay's showing these behaviors, they're super anxious, how do we get them unanxious? Not get them to chill down. How do we reduce that anxiety on them? Is it anxiety around a client? Is it anxiety because somebody's saying something? Are there microaggressions going on that they're trying to deal with in a, being a principal, sitting at the big people's tables? So it's like making sure that the people who are with me at that table are seeing the red flags that I'm seeing and are challenging before I go in rather than after. It's all been changing mindsets and getting people to think wider, and that's changed so much around how we talk about things and how we practically do things.
What advice do you have for our community who might feel unsafe, challenged, and or experience red flags in interviews?
I'm going to say something, and it'll probably end up being bleeped. Basically, them, they don't deserve you. You're better than they are. But I am also aware that that comes from a big position of advantage, because it's very hard. There's a talk that I give called Why Your Team Has Never and Will Never Hired Me, the fine art of not fitting in. And I talk there about being unemployed for 16 weeks, 18 weeks. And I did 48 interviews. And for the majority of those, I was told I was not a culture fit. I chose the worst place I could have to work at, but I had no other choice. So sometimes you will be forced into those choices. They suck immensely, and leave them as quickly as you can with your sanity intact. Don't think you have to stick around for X number of time if the job sucked. Don't be sold this absolute on your CV that, oh, you've got to be in this job for 6 months. If you join somewhere and they're homophobic or racist or misogynistic, or they're microaggressing against you, and you are red flagging every 5 minutes, and you're sitting there going, this place is unsafe, not good for me, and I'm going to suffer being here, get the out and find somewhere else. And I know that there's an economic choice there, but staying there will do more damage to you, even if you push on for those 6 months. Like, I stayed in a very bad place for a year, and there's some great things I learned, but I was bullied and abused for a year with somebody who didn't even like the way that I wrote my name. So, I had that from day one, every single day, pressure about how I signed my name. Another place that I ended up, I was there for 6 months. And again, it was a very bullying environment. It was not a good environment. And I got my way out of there just after 6 months as quickly as I could. So, but the thing that I would say to the me going in there now is like, that field of red flags, you're much better than they are. You're much better than that. Get yourself out of there. Don't think you've got to stick it out. That sticking out something because, oh, I've jumped around too much on my CV. Just tell people, I applied to this place and it turned out that they were not as advertised. The job was not as advertised. That's all you need to say. Now, that's bland enough. You don't have to outright say that they're a racist, misogynistic, homophobic bunch of, but you're able to explain that jump in your CV. I will just repeat it. You're better than that role, and you deserve better, and they do not deserve you. If they're not respecting you, if they're not making space for you, if they're not looking at the marvelous being that you are and saying, we want all of that, we don't just want this tick box and this tick box, we want that whole thing, then him. They do not deserve you.
What are some positive changes that are happening in the technology space?
The thing that I will say is that I am seeing technology as a space where real diversity has a place to live and a place to be, because that life experience, that different way of seeing the world, those different experiences that everyone brings is starting to really be valued, is starting to really be encouraged. One of the reasons that I'm really enthused about getting more, especially non-binary and trans and queer and skater kids and all of that into technology, is because it's a space that saved me. And I know that it can save other people because it's got there's a huge variety of places that you can work for. There's a huge variety of projects you can work with. And there's also a huge variety of roles you can work in. If your Cody is only average or bad or barely there, in my case, there are other roles in technology that will fit your brain, that will fit the way that you think, that will fit your awesomeness.